And about 5 years before I retired, I thought, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I was going to retire when I was 51, and I don't play golf. So I thought, well, I love making pastries and desserts, and I would always be the person to volunteer to bring desserts if we were going to someone's house. So I was the dessert
everybody's favorite
queen.
person.
Yes.
Yes.
And that morphed into my wanting to do chocolate at some point. I love chocolate. It's hard not to.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Total Michigan, where we interview ordinary Michiganders doing some pretty extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cliff Duvinois. So today I'm in Grand Haven, and one of the things that I've never had on the show is to actually talk to a chocolatier. And I actually had an opportunity to meet today's guest when I was actually up in Traverse City, of all places, at a chocolate festival. And when I was talking to them, I absolutely loved their story. I loved their chocolate even more, and come to find out they're in Grand Haven. So I was like, you know what? Let's make this interview happen. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the owner of Patricia's Chocolates, and that would be Patty Christopher. Patty, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Excellent. So tell us, what is Patricia's Chocolates?
We're a French chocolate shop in Grand Haven, Michigan.
Yeah.
And I do artisan chocolate with European chocolate artisan ganache. And that sounds backwards, doesn't it? Yes.
That's okay.
Okay.
And you use the machines here that they're using to make your chocolate and all that other stuff?
We do. We have enrobers. We have a tumbler where we tumble to make chocolate-coated, chocolate-covered malt balls, coffee beans, locally roasted coffee beans. We make macarons here, shortbread cookies, caramels.
And you also work with a lot of the farmers here in Michigan.
We do, yeah. And if not, I'm sourcing from Europe, where everything is non-GMO.
There you go. So if you would, let's take a step back here. I want to kind of talk about your journey into how you got into this world. So take us back. Where are you from and where did you grow up?
I grew up here in Grand Haven.
Okay.
And I've really never left. Went to college here, became a special education teacher.
Oh, interesting.
And then went to Michigan State and got a couple more degrees, graduate degrees. Ended up being a school psychologist and had a private practice as a psychologist, worked with children and adolescents. And then I worked as a school psychologist in the schools forever for Grand Rapids Public Schools.
Right.
And Mona Shores Public Schools here, and retired in 2008. And about 5 years before I retired, I thought, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I was going to retire when I was 51, and I don't play golf. So I thought, well, I love making pastries and desserts. So I started calling culinary schools and ended up starting to take classes at the French Pastry School in Chicago.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Barry Callebaut Chocolate Academy in Montreal. And then they opened a branch in Chicago, too. So I've taken most of my classes from them.
So let's take a step back here. So why did you decide to get into education?
Well, I always wanted to become a kindergarten teacher.
Okay.
And in the 70s, when I went to school, there was a glut of regular ed teachers. And we were all told in our first year, when Grand Valley was still Grand Valley State Colleges, that if we expected to get teaching positions when we graduated, we should probably think about special education.
Right.
And special education was fairly new. That started in the early 70s. So that was the way we went. And we had different endorsements in emotionally impaired, learning disabilities, mentally impaired. We also did student teaching in regular ed, so I could be a regular ed teacher with that endorsement too.
Right.
So I just started working as a special education teacher. We had a resource room, and then that morphed into a self-contained emotionally impaired classroom. And then I thought, I think I like what this person is doing who comes into my room and takes children out of my classroom and gives them evaluations and psychological tests and personality assessments. So I need to learn more about that. And so I called Grand Valley, and they didn't have a program. There were only 3 in the state. So one was Michigan State.
Nice.
So I worked
Okay.
full-time and drove to Michigan State at night and spent the summers there and got my degrees, specialist degree and a master's.
So you stay in education, doing psychological work, you have your side practice. At what point in time did you start fooling around with the world of pastries?
That was probably in my 20s.
Oh, okay.
And I would always be the person to volunteer to bring desserts if we were going to someone's house. So I was the dessert
So everybody's favorite
queen.
person.
Yes.
Yes.
Just elaborate torts, ganache fillings, chocolate bands around the outside of the cakes. And that morphed into my wanting to do chocolate at some point. I love chocolate. It's hard not to.
It's hard not to. So now within, like you were talking about 5 years before your retirement, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, I have to do something. Why the hassle of going back to like the Culinary Institute and to these chocolatier schools and things like that? Why not just do it on your own? Did you have some kind of a vision in your mind at that time, or what did that look like?
I think what I learned, I started looking at pastry books, and I realized that the pastry books I needed to focus on were in grams, not teaspoons, cups, half cups. So the
Okay.
measurements were different. That made me start thinking about Europe and European chefs, and in particular pastry chefs and chocolatiers. It was a relatively new field when I started
Right.
in the early 2000s with this. So it wasn't that I was going back for another degree because I was already working full time, so
Right.
I couldn't do that. But they would have guest chef classes where they would have chefs from France, Belgium come over, and they were 3-day classes. And so I would go to Chicago or Montreal for 3 days and just take classes with other chefs from around the country who had the same interests that I had. So
Right.
we're all connected. We take a lot of classes together. We support each other. We're in different states. We can help resource ingredients that are important to what we do.
Right.
It's been a blast, actually. It's
And
been
now,
fun.
so it's not like you went to school full time, culinary school full time.
Right.
It was just taking these specialty classes.
Correct.
Oh,
That's how I started.
Right.
Now, some people actually do a 2-year program or a 6-month program.
Right.
But you don't need to. You
Right.
can end up where I am without doing that.
Right.
You have to be a little passionate about what you do, though. You're thinking about it all the time.
Yes, you do. Because being in the world of pastry, that's like a whole other level of
It
skill
is.
set versus just, let's open a cake box and dump it into a bowl with a couple eggs and some, vegetable syrup or
do.
something, because that's, guilty as charged. So as you're taking these classes, your skills are developing, you're learning more about the chocolate world. At what point in time did you say to yourself, you know what, maybe I should open up a shop?
About a year into it.
Really? So
I
you
started
still had
thinking
4
that.
years to go before you retired.
Right. But about a year into taking classes, I was making in my home kitchen a lot of chocolates and giving them away, ganache
Right.
palettes as I make them, or bonbons. I was giving so many away that it was becoming quite expensive. And I remember saying to my husband, I think I could turn this into a business.
Ooh.
But I didn't want a brick and mortar store. I didn't want to have employees at the time. I just wanted to make chocolate.
Right.
So I called the health department and asked them how I would put a commercial kitchen in our house. Found out it wouldn't be licensed under the health department. It would be Department of Agriculture. So then I called the Department of Agriculture. That ended up going before the Planning Commission in Grand Haven, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I had permission to then do a home occupation
Right.
in my neighborhood. Letters were sent out to all my neighbors so they would know that this person wanted to do that. So if they wanted to go to City Hall and
Complain
or
whatever.
protest,
Yes.
they had an opportunity to do that. Actually, my neighbors were quite enthusiastic about having someone
imagine they
making
were.
chocolate. So I had some of them calling the city hall or, like writing a letter. One of the elderly women wrote a letter and just said they thought it was great that they would have a chocolate maker in the neighborhood. So I can't have signage or anything like that. But
Sure.
that's how I started my business. And it was just by making 7 different chocolates, and I had already sourced out my packaging, which comes from Tokyo, so it's Japanese. And then I was trying to figure out the designs and how they would look, and I went to Art of the Table in Grand Rapids, and she was the first person who really believed in me and that this could be something that she could sell in her shop. So she's carried my chocolates ever since, and then from there, it went to selling to other shops around the state, and then out of state now too. So I still maintain that, and I have this commercial kitchen in our
Right.
home that's licensed, and it has to be relicensed every year. You renew your license. And after a while, I was getting equipment in there, and my footprint was expanding. And then I realized that we were becoming so busy because I was hand dipping everything.
Right.
And when I was doing 3 and 500, I started getting this twinge in
yes,
my, and I thought, okay, maybe that could be carpal tunnel. We need the heavy duty equipment, the I Love Lucy machine with
Yep.
a conveyor belt. So we purchased that. And then I thought, I can't manage all this on my own. I am going to have employees, but I can't have employees in a home occupation.
Right. Yes.
So that's when we started looking for a place to have our shop. And we ended up here downtown in Grand Haven. It's the perfect side of the street. We don't get sun in the window. If I were across the street, that would be an issue, but it's not here. We don't want sun in our windows because it melts chocolate.
It does.
And we've been open for 8.5 years now as a chocolate shop.
So let me go back and when you first started making the chocolates in your kitchen, you were talking about how you were trying to get people from around the state to carry them. How did that meeting go? I mean, did you just like kind of knock on their door and be like, hey, try my chocolate. Do you want to sell it? How did that work?
Well, for instance, Amy at Art of the Table, I took a 9-piece box with a piece of paper towel and a knife, a little paring knife, and introduced herself. We had heard about her from one of her wine reps, who was the husband of one of the principals at my school, in one of the schools I served in Grand Rapids.
Right, yeah.
And so he had already said, this person makes chocolate, you should talk to her. And so I called her and asked if I could come in, and I did. And I was cutting the chocolate for her because we do recommend that my chocolate squares be cut into 6 or quarters. They're
Right.
quite intense with a flavor. They're just all natural, like fruit purees and fresh fruits and things like that. So I would cut those, and she tried them and just thought, this is a winner. I'm not carrying anything like that. And I also started out being only one, like, I don't sell anywhere else in Grand Rapids. It's just one shop per town.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want to be everywhere. I'm only one person. But now that I'm here, I have pastry chefs working for me. I have a baker. We have a great staff that's been with me through all of this.
For our audience, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the transition from psychologist to business owner, as well as what you can expect when you come here to Patricia's Chocolates. We'll see you after the break. Hey, if you are enjoying these great interviews, just take a moment and go to totalmichigan.com/join, and you can get these episodes sent directly to your inbox because there's a lot more great stories coming. See you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Total Michigan, where we interview ordinary Michiganders doing some pretty extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cliff Duvenois. So today we're talking all things chocolate with the owner of Patricia's Chocolate in Grand Haven, and that would be Patty Christopher. And Patty, before the break, we were talking about how you had hit this point where you're thinking to yourself, you know what, we're going to have to get a dedicated space. We're going to have to get more equipment because I just can't do this by myself. Your business is starting to grow. You're starting to get your chocolates all around the state. So talk to us about, when you made this decision, talk to us about finding the location, and how did that whole process work?
We were actually selling our chocolates in one of the local shops here, and we just thought that we could sell more chocolates than the shop was selling. So we really did need a shop, and we had corporate people coming in wanting us to do things.
Ooh.
And it was just so much work that because I said I had needed help, we found the perfect location. We were going to first purchase a building, but we couldn't find the perfect building that was for sale at the time.
Right.
And then we found this space. But it didn't look like this. We had to build it out. And my idea was that it would be a little French chocolate shop, a little European shop. So people would come in and they'd hear French music and they'd see French things. Some of the words that and the terminology we would be using would be in French. We would have a video on the wall that is over my right corner, my right shoulder. So it's always running photos of our trips to Paris and to France. And we've invited customers of ours to share their pictures with us too, and then we put them up,
cute.
which is really nice. But our idea, my husband's also a psychologist, was a school psychologist, and also is a private practice psychologist who's also retired. And when you're doing therapy, you could be in therapy with someone for a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years. But the idea of the chocolate is it's like instant therapy. It's your instant happiness. It's not a long process, and it's just for the moment. But it's really special when you try it, and all of a sudden your focus is on what's on your palate and the flavors you're experiencing. So it's a small indulgence that is pretty much affordable.
Right.
When we first started, we were doing samples of every chocolate in our case.
Oh,
I
okay.
have about 55 different chocolates I make right now on a regular rotating basis, and we were cutting them into 12s. But we were going through so much product, and then with COVID, that ended, and we just never picked up on that. But now we still sample out the percentages of the chocolate so people can have a flavor that way. And because my husband was also a teacher, because we're both teachers, we're really focused on teaching people about chocolate and why this chocolate and the European chocolate with the percentage is different than the American chocolate that
And sharing
all of
the
us
story
grew up.
as well. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. The one thing I noticed when I came in here, to go back to what you were talking about before, is when I came in here and the smell of chocolate hit me, one of the thoughts that went through my head was, it is impossible to be in a bad mood and walk through that door. Because as soon as I smelled the chocolate, like a smile came across my face. Because that is just the thought of chocolate has that impact.
That happens with people coming in, too, and they'll comment on it. And those of us who work here, we can no longer smell the chocolate. I can be gone for a week and come back, I'm still not smelling chocolate. What's really interesting is we had a trio come over to our house, and they were
Keep going.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Maggie. I just had lunch with Maggie. We had a trio from the other side of the state come over, and they were at the Starlight Room here performing, and we had them spend the night with us. One of the guys said to me the next morning, he said, I walked out of my bedroom, and I was just hit with the smell of chocolate. And I said, you can smell the chocolate in our house? But then I thought, well, that's where our commercial kitchen is. So the chocolate is all over, and so I guess you would smell it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, but you smell that here, and on baking days, you're smelling the shortbread cookies, or you're smelling the macarons. I think what it tells people is that the product is being made here,
Right.
and it's fresh, and everything we make in-house. That way we know the story behind it, and we can tell people about what they're tasting.
Speaking of which, and man, my brain is just filling up with questions so fast. One of the things that you do here is, and before the microphone's turned on, is you were sharing the stories with me about all of the different Michigan farmers that you buy product from that actually make it into your chocolate. Why is that even important? Why not just go to a big box store and buy a can of blueberries off the shelf versus going to somebody's blueberry farm to get them?
Well, it's a lot more interesting to meet the people behind the product.
Which is true.
With the chestnuts, as we were talking about before the interview, I get them from the Winkle Chestnut Farm, and I pick them myself. Lavender comes from Lavender Hill Farms up near Charlevoix and Boyne City.
Right.
I use liqueurs from Black Star Farms in a lot of my chocolates.
Right.
I have an entire table filled with honey, local honey from Dr. Brian Stork, who's a urologist in Muskegon, and he has backyard honey hives. So I'm using his honey, and I'm using it to make a ganache honey hive. There's honey-drenched pears, I make a caramel out of the honey, and I dry Harold Gold pears, and those are sliced and dried, and then the honey caramel is piped on top, and they're double dipped in chocolate. I'm doing honeycomb toffee, everything with this honey, and then we're using it as a kind of to raise funds for an organization called Step Up, which is in Muskegon. It's a nonprofit started by a group of local physicians who were concerned about teenagers aging out of the foster care system. Where do they go when they're 18? They're out on the street. So they've provided housing for them. And so we always give a portion of our sales to them.
Nice.
So that helps them do that. We've been doing that for at least the last 5 or 6 years.
Wonderful.
So that's another connection. He's not really a farmer, but he's a beekeeper.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so. To continue your story here, because I have to ask this question. My curiosity is just driving me nuts. So you're going from basically being a school psychologist to all of a sudden you're signing a lease on a building, right? You're paying all this money to bring equipment in. You were talking before about how you've got these employees working for you and all these chefs under you. And what did that transition look like? I mean, was there any point in time where you said, I must be out of my mind?
No, I think it happened so slowly. And everything was from necessity,
right?
For necessity, that you just went with it, and you were just grateful to have these people on your staff who could help you. And what's really nice about it is I get to train other people to do what I do.
Right.
I'm on the culinary board for the advisory board for the culinary school that's in Muskegon.
Oh, nice.
That's been almost 10 years. But it's wonderful. I have a connection with the pastry chefs there, and I take a lot of interns. But I think that's a responsibility, especially the teacher and me. You share the information because chocolates are they're so difficult to work with. Sugars, chocolate, there are temperatures you have to keep in mind. There's an entire chemistry behind it. And if the European chefs are kind enough to come over here and teach the American chefs how to do things, then we should be kind enough to teach other people who want to learn how to do things how it works.
Right.
If I have someone come in and say, oh, I make macarons, but mine are flat or they spread out, and then I have a whole series of questions I ask them to try to get them to see, this is what you did wrong, because I know how to troubleshoot now.
Right.
But it's only because someone else has taught me that, and I paid attention, and so now I can teach someone else too. I mean, you don't want the crafts to die. You want the craft to carry on.
Yes.
So that other people can start their own business or be successful at home. I do a lot of infusions in my chocolate for the ganache.
Right.
And an infusion is where I will take a spice. Well, let's just say I'm taking mint. So I take peppermint. I grow the peppermint in my yard in pots in the winter. I'm taking the mint. I'm doing infusion in the heavy cream. So people will come in and I'll start talking about, the different chocolates and what comes from my garden. And then they say, oh, I like to bake too, or oh, I like to make a mousse, or I make ice cream. And then I'll think, well, they might like to know this
Right.
information. So I tell them how to do an infusion, because I'll say, oh, you may want to know how to do an infusion to get that flavor from your garden into something that you're making for your family or your friends. So it's about teaching. It's about making people happy. And another thing I think that we all know here working, that if someone were to come into town and stop by a chocolate shop, we want them to think that this is the friendliest place they've entered into, and maybe the rest of the town is worth exploring. Maybe everyone else is so friendly. So we always pay attention to people when they come in. We ask if they've been here before, and we have a conversation. And we're always thanking them as they leave, because without them, we wouldn't have a business.
Right.
And it's not just selling a product or making a product. It's having a connection with people so that they'll want to come back to Grand Haven and they'll want to enjoy what we have to offer. So we'll tell people, we'll ask people, have you taken a walk on the boardwalk? Have you walked out to the end of the pier?
Mm-hmm.
Have you taken a hike here? Do you know about Rosie Park? Because we have park systems all over this area too, right. County parks. So we do a lot of that here.
Certainly. And if somebody is coming here, you're talking about before, like when they come to town, they find the chocolate shop. So if somebody comes here to Grand Haven, they see Patricia's chocolates. What can they experience when they come in here? Talk to us about that.
Well, when they first come in, they'll smell.
Yes, you will smell
the chocolate. We have, for those of you who can't see the chocolate shop, we have house-made marshmallows. We dip them in chocolate. We have all sorts of products for hot chocolate. Shortbread cookies packaged differently. We have chocolates that pair with wine. We have chocolates infused with local tea from Traverse City. Everything here is packaged really nicely, so you could just pick it up and give it to someone as a hostess gift or a birthday gift or someone in the hospital. Everything looks pretty. People will often look at the chocolate and they'll say, oh, this looks too pretty to eat. So but it is supposed to be edible. I mean, you're supposed to eat these things, but we want every step to look nice. So when you see our boxes, you'll see the chocolates inside. You'll see a little chocolate map with descriptions. It's the whole experience. We let people choose their ribbon colors. It's an interaction where if someone comes in and they want to purchase chocolate for a friend, they're an integral part of making the purchase, because they're making a selection of which chocolates they want in the box, what the ribbon color is going to be. We have cards that they can write with them. We do a lot of shipping too, because people come in and they enjoy the experience. Even people who are just visiting Grand Haven, they'll come in year after year, and then they'll bring other friends. People who live here will bring in their friends or their company that's coming from out of state, because they want them to have the same experience that they had when they first came in.
You were talking before the microphone went hot about, like, there's like one lady, I think you said in California, that you ship like 1,000 pieces of chocolate to her or something along those lines?
And that's my rare Peruvian chocolate, my Fortunato number 4. And it's the 100%. And she orders it maybe once or twice a year. whenever she runs out, but it's our 100%. And the storyline behind the Fortunato number 4 is an incredible story, as it's genetically the mother trees of all the other cacao varietal types.
Right.
There is a whole history with that.
Yes, and I wish we had time to cover that.
I know.
Because I absolutely love that story. However, if you're listening, watching to this, you can come by here and actually see the story because it's actually on the wall. But Patty, if somebody's listening to this and they do want to come by, hear the story. They want to smell the chocolate. They want to buy the chocolate. What's the best way for them to connect with you online? Where are you located? How can people find you?
It's just patriciaschocolate.com. They can call us. They can check out our Facebook page, Instagram page.
Wonderful.
And we are at 126 Washington. There are 3 blocks to our downtown, and we're in the middle block.
Okay, perfect. Patty, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. This has been fun.
We've enjoyed having you here, too.
Well, I appreciate that. For our audience, you can always roll on over to totalmichigan.com and click on Patty's interview and get the links that she mentioned above. We'll see you the next time when we talk to another Michigander doing some pretty extraordinary things. We'll see you then.